St. Lucie, Florida, which again is about 120 miles south of Orlando, and said this a bit earlier today about his son.
I wish this was good news and happy news, but as a father, I don't want any father to go through what we are going through. I don't approve what he did. What he did was completely an act of terrorist. He had in the house, United States is my house. United States is the house that always taking care of me, my family.
As we learn more now about Mateen, through his neighbors, through his family, through his visits to Saudi Arabia twice, 2011, 2012. There's growing evidence that he was emotionally disturbed and filled with rage, according to some. A former Florida police officer who once worked with Mateen as a private security guard, he describes him as unstable and unhinged. The former co-worker saying that he raised red flags with her employer, reporting Mateen's extreme behavior and racist and sometimes sexist and homophobic comments. But he says the company refused to fire Mateen because, he argues, he was Muslim.
It was constant. It was not any one specific item. I knew him for a whole year. There was never a moment where he didn't have anger and rage, and he was always loud and cursing. And any time either a female or a black person would come by, he would use horrible words.
Dr. Zuhdi Jasser is founder and president of the American Islamic Forum for Democracy and author of the book A Battle for the Soul of Islam, also a former U.S. Navy lieutenant commander. And doctor, we speak again, whether it was Boston, yes, or Chattanooga or Fort Hood or San Bernardino, and now it is Orlando. You make the point that we need to put the picture together. What picture are you referring to, doctor?
Yeah, I mean, we need to stop drilling down as the lone wolf. These are not lone wolves. And, you know, to listen to this guy's father, it's almost like asking the bartender why the alcoholic drove into oncoming pedestrians. And the bottom line is that we have a problem. And to look at the bigger picture, it is theocratic Islam. It is a sense that a theocratic supremacist mentality that the Sharia state dominates over the land that's not Islam, what they call the land of war. So any vulnerable minority, be it the Jewish community, be it free speech advocates that push the lines of free speech, as we saw with Charlie Hebdo, be it the attacks on synagogues, the attacks against women, misogyny, and now the attacks on the gay community. This doesn't come out of nowhere. Violent homophobia comes from non-violent homophobia. And the president and our Homeland Security need to wake up. And I'll remind you, Bill, our president went to a mosque in February in Baltimore that we warned them from the Muslim reform movement had sermons that were homophobic, but yet we were ignored. The homophobia that comes from Saudi Arabia that penetrates so many of the theocrats in our community needs to be exposed, just as the misogyny, anti-Semitism, and anti-Westernism. It's all part of the same picture.
Islamic State apparently taking credit. It was a radio broadcast or some sort of message earlier today, and they called him one of the soldiers of the caliphate in America. Now, what are we to understand about the state of that caliphate here today? How many followers are they? How radicalized have they become? Where are we in this current struggle against them, doctor?
Well, certainly the Islamists of ISIS are more of a threat than anything we've seen before because they have land in Syria and Iraq. But make no mistake, we could put a military operation to finally get rid of them in 6 months, and the Islamists of some form would come back, just as Al-Qaeda, Jabhat al-Nusra, Jamaat Islamiyah. As long as Saudi Arabia, Qatar, Turkey, and the Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt continue to pump across the planet political Islam, it will rear its head in various forms. And until we Muslims, in this month of Ramadan and Atonement, come to terms and look in the mirror and recognize that we have to take Islam, like Christianity went through against theocracy, we have to take Islam and defeat the theocrats that dominate our faith. They'll continue to say that the caliphate exists. Caliphism is an ideology that needs to be defeated, and ISIS will take credit for whatever they can in the land of war, which they see the West. Even though they may not have planned this one, they'll take credit for it because they see us on the defense, and they are not on the defense at all ideologically.
Yeah, one last point on this now. You know what the threat has been in Afghanistan for 20 years. You knew what the threat was in Iraq, and that was all but eliminated in Sadr City in 2007. But now with Assad in Syria and ISIS in eastern Syria and western Iraq, with Libya after Gaddafi, look at what has happened since then, 9 years later. Do you believe, as an American, we had this on lockdown in 2007 in Sadr City?
Well, Bill, as long as we think that this is a military problem that needs a military solution, we won't. We'll continue this whack-a-mole program. But until we start to engage a third pathway in the Middle East, the Assads of the world will continue to produce the ISISes of the world, because that's how they maintain the sympathy of the West, is by letting the ISISes and the Wahhabis allow the Al-Qaedas to thrive, etc. We need to help the third pathway, which is the movements that was an opportunity of the Arab awakening, not militarily, but to help them liberally advance their ideas of freedom and democracy and have a doctrine of liberty across the Muslim world, and empower, especially in America, the reformists, and knock off helping the apologists who are continuing to help the Islamists of the Brotherhood across the world. It's time for us to wake up and have a strategy against Islamic nonviolent theocracy, because the violent theocrats are continuing to defeat us in this war.
Well stated, Doctor. Thank you for your time. I would argue that we had engaged that Sunni awakening 9 years ago. Doctor,
yes.
Thanks. Jasser there in Arizona.
Thank you.
Back to Heather now in New York.